Someday.
Okay, it's 2:59 p.m. on Wednesday, February 5, 2020, and this meeting of the Civil Service Commission is hereby called to order. Roll call, please.
Ms. Santos?
I'm sorry, I do not have my hearing aids.
Okay, well, let me first, sorry.
Here.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Koss and Chairman Ripka.
Here. So Mr. Koss reported a scheduling conflict at this time due to unexpected travel. As such, I move to excuse the absence of Mr. Koss. Do I hear a second?
Second.
So we have such a move by Mr. Ripka, second by Mrs. Santos. Any discussion? I would think not. Roll call, please.
Ms. Santos?
Yes.
Chairman Ripka?
Yes. Mr. Koss is hereby excused. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Agenda number 3. On behalf of the commission, I wish to extend a very warm welcome to our newest member of the commission, Mrs. Mary Jane Santos,
Thank you.
and our new city council liaison, Vice Mayor, Mr. Kent Schaefer.
Thank you.
So, Mary Jane, if I Googled correctly,
Oh, my gosh.
I understand that you served on the city council from 2001 to 2006?
Probably. That sounds about
Yeah.
right.
Had a brilliant career with the Delaware County District Library, spanning over 31 years, and also served on the Chamber of Commerce, the Lions, and the Rotary Clubs.
Correct.
There we go. I Googled correctly. You Googled well. Ken, you need no introduction. You've been on city council since 2013, served as vice mayor since 2015, and you also serve in the Finance Committee, Parking and Safety Committee, and MORPC, which is the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. So welcome to you both, and thank you for your past and continuing service to our great city. Is there anything you would like to add? Either? Okay, let's roll. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank former Councilman Mr. Jim Browning and former Commission member Mr. Frank Hickman for their prior service to the Commission as well. Please read agenda item number 4 into the record.
Approval of the motion summary for the meeting held November 6, 2019, as recorded and transcribed.
Okay, having read the motion summary in advance, does any commission member wish to initiate further discussion? If not, I move to accept and approve the subject motion summary as recorded and transcribed. Do I hear a second? Okay, without that, I move to defer action on the subject approval until the next meeting. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All righty, we have such a move by Mr. Ripka, second by Mrs. Santos. Any final discussion? I would think not. Roll call, please.
Ms. Santos?
Abstain. Wait.
Yes. No.
Oh, we're moving on to table it, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And Chairman Ripka?
Yes. It's just a technical thing, so since Eric and I were the parties to the, and witnesses to the
right,
meeting, we'll
can't
just do it when he
prove
gets back. Please read agenda item number 5 into the record.
Update of the firefighter certified list.
Okay, so we last approved a firefighter certified list on November 6, 2019, our last meeting. That refreshed list contained 13 full-time candidate names and 6 part-time candidate names, and a part-time firefighter was hired off of that list. This new list remains essentially intact with 12 full-time and 7 part-time candidate names, and you're proposing to convert a part-time firefighter, one with a rather high score, 92.72, to full-time. So this seems to be a pretty good success of your part-time firefighter program.
That's
Get them
correct.
part-time, they excel, they do everything they need to do, and they're ready to roll.
Absolutely. Tim's done an outstanding job for us. He was the number 1 candidate on the full-time list. And I think we take a step back and really reflect some of the changes that we've made and some of the success that we've had. Some of you may remember, I know certainly staff remembers, that we made some modifications of the hiring process, that we introduced that we would do an annual test and we would put it in a hold pattern. And the thought process was that it would essentially speed up the hiring and promotional process by essentially 2 months plus. Having said that, this will be the first time that we will go without a loss of any time of an employee. So, and this is quite significant because we're having the retirement of Lieutenant Jeff Cormier that's going to retire. The day that he retires, we will actually be promoting, we'll talk a little bit about this in the next resolution, but we'll have somebody moving into his position that next shift, so there will be no loss of
That's the
time.
goal, yeah.
But with that, we will also be moving somebody up into a full-time status. So we will remain with full staffing with no downtime whatsoever. I think that's significant, and I appreciate the support that we've had, and I think our process is going. And the key thing that we've have focused on since day one was not mass hiring, but hiring the right people for the Delaware Fire Department. I think we've done a very good job of making sure that we hire the right people. Tim Garwood has done a great job. He's been working with the crews, and he's ready to move up into that full-time process, and we're very excited to give him that opportunity.
It's fantastic, and I give kudos to the Administrative Services Division for being there and running the whole process. I think they do a fantastic job. So the 2020 city budget provides you with 6 new positions. So once you got 100% staffed, you got 6 new ones, but I'm gonna say that's a fantastic thing. And I think the city council has been pretty good to the safety workforce in the last few years. So I've been tracking the increments in the budgets, and, you know, given the dire straits that some of the local communities get into with fiscal things and roads and things like that, I think they do a pretty good job supporting the safety workforces. So kudos to the city council.
Thank you. We've been very blessed also to have the funding that we end up having in the support, so thank you.
So you're getting 6 new positions for community paramedics. So this is going to be dedicated primarily to 1,000 or so special needs folks in the city.
And really the focus of this, yes, we do have 1,000 special needs patients here in our city. It's actually estimated that 10% to 15% of our population nationwide is what they consider special needs patients. Those are patients either they have medical conditions or some other type of special condition that needs to be have special attention and care provided. But with these positions, ultimately, and we're currently in discussions pertaining to how to properly staff those positions. But with that, the focus is really going to be more on risk reduction. And we're trying to make a transition of our operations. And in the past, our operations was somebody called 911. The guys would go and move on to the scene. And well, that works, and that will always be a service that we provide. I'd like to try to take a different approach, a more proactive approach in our services to our community, and start identifying where our at-risk patients are, and how we can reduce that risk to those patients. Because if we can reduce the risk of those patients, then we can ultimately reduce the harm that may be caused, and also reduce the cost of health care or whatever services that we provide. So they'll be looking at special needs patients. We'll also be looking at our typical common responses that we end up making. So if we're identifying slips and falls as being, you know, the item, we'll be looking and working with service coordinators or some other services to identify where those at-risk patients are and try to get in there to prevent, maybe put carpeting if that's what we're identifying that they're slipping on area carpets, maybe get something adhesive or some type of thing that's preventing that. Yeah, training's another primary issue. So that is the thought process with that, and it's going to be more holistic than just the EMS side of where the community paramedicine is going to be, because really we'll be taking our risk reduction division, which is our fire inspection, fire prevention, and all that, and making that more holistic and really truly being that risk reduction program.
So let's say I'm 65 on Medicare, and I called an ambulance over to the ER. Maybe didn't really need to, but I just felt comfortable to do that. Do I eventually get a bill for Medicare for that ambulance ride?
No. Here in the city of Delaware, we are not doing any type of EMS billing. And that is twofold. Number one, going back to the start of EMS here in Delaware County, there was funding set aside to provide for EMS services, and that was through a half-cent sales tax. So, the city, as well as Liberty Township, gets reimbursement on. But also tied into that was 1987 when we passed our first fire levy where that funding was dedicated for the fire department. The citizens were asked, would you like to provide funding through a income tax? And if this doesn't fail, then we'll have to look at EMS billing. If we receive this, we'll not have to do EMS billing. So there was an inherent belief that the voters also approved that we not do any type of EMS billing. Having said that, that's been, 30 years ago that discussion went. There's certainly, when you look around us, the city of Delaware and Harlem Township are the only two agencies now in Delaware County not doing EMS billing. So there's certainly some thought that maybe this should end up being considered. I know this is maybe where I'm a little bit different as a fire chief. We have to look at the city as a whole and the city's needs. And the people are already paying for the EMS billing, if you will, through their insurance rates or healthcare insurance. So and we've already checked, there will not be an increase if that ended up occurring. But I know that's one of the policy decisions that city council and the city manager may end up making, that maybe what we end up doing is offsetting some of our income tax in lieu of receiving EMS billing funds. So what I'm concerned about and what I want to make sure is that we don't get into a situation that we were previously, that now we've lowered our taxes, too much, that now with the promise that we made in 2010 that we told the public we were not going to come back for any additional funding. This is it. We certainly don't want to have to go back in a later time for that. So I want to make sure if we diversify, we truly diversify, but we remain financially stable.
Good. So with respect to the 6 positions, we'll do whatever we can to accommodate the hiring once you finish your management processes, et cetera. So that's good news.
Thank you.
Does any commission member have any further questions or comments? Okay, if not, I move to accept and approve the subject firefighter certified lift as presented. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, we have a move by Mr. Ripka, second by Mrs. Santos. Any final discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Ms. Santos?
Yes.
Chairman Ripka?
Yes. Okay, the motion carries. Please read agenda item number 6 into the record.
Update of the fire lieutenant promotional list.
Okay, in the event that a lieutenant's position is not currently open, the lieutenant's promotional process will be placed on hold. All candidates that have passed the written examination will be placed on the promotional hold list. The promotional hold list will be presented to the Civil Service Commission and made effective upon posting at all fire stations. The promotional hold list shall be used when an opening occurs within the rank of lieutenant. When a position does not open within 1 year from the effective date, the promotional hold list will expire, necessitating a new one. So we last approved a fire lieutenant promotional list on October 24, 2018, and we reviewed a new fire lieutenant promotional hold list at our last meeting on November 6th. And this new fire lieutenant promotional hold list will be good for the year, contains 5 candidate names, and has the associated scores from the assessment center and the review panel. So Chief, I yield the floor to you again.
Thank you, and once again, good afternoon. I guess it was late October, we ended up having a written test for our 5 candidates, and all passed, and really created what we presented at the last meeting, which was that promotional hold list. Since that time, Lieutenant Jeff Cormier has announced his retirement, and so now we're moving forward with the process. Earlier last month now, in early January, we ended up having an assessment center, so the scores were combined, tallied. We also had our officer interview panel, and we're recommending moving forward with the adoption of this fire lieutenant promotional list. From there, provided that this is approved today, I already have interviews scheduled for tomorrow with the top 3 candidates, and it is my hope that I could make a recommendation to the city manager for the promotion of one of the top 3 candidates. And in doing so, as I mentioned, that would allow us in March, when Lieutenant Cormier retires, that this person would be ready to step up into that position.
Yep, without any delay whatsoever. That seems pretty straightforward. Does any commission members have any further questions or comments? If not, I move to accept and approve the subject fire lieutenant promotion list as presented. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Ripka, second by Mrs. Santos. Any final discussion? If not, roll call, please.
Ms. Santos?
Yes.
Chairman Ripka?
Yes. Motion carries. Do anybody in the public have any comments to make? Alrighty. We didn't meet in January, but Chief, I wanted to pass on that everybody down on the southeast quadrant would love to see the firehouse lit up like it was. So between Glen Ross and the firehouse, it was like our own fantasy of lights. We had a lot of traffic going through those roads, and it was just kind of fantastic to see. I just wanted to pass that.
I certainly pass that on, and we had a group of firefighters that really took that upon themselves, and it was neat. They were very proud of it, and I was very proud of the job they did too.
So many times we come across Africa and go across the road over Elm Creek over there, and I was with my wife coming home from dinner, and they looked at Berlin, and she just goes, ew, not even close to what we have. But anyway, it looked pretty good.
Well, and as we mentioned, you know, as we progress with the building of our fire stations, the past two have been different fire stations than what we've had previously. Certainly the one, the main house being on Ohio Wesleyan's campus, 302 has been on an industrial, but we've really gotten into these residential fire stations, and the amount of involvement that the personnel have had in those communities and the communities have had in the fire station, and the amount of people stopping in to see the fire trucks and bring cookies and things and so forth has been, you know, really an enjoyable part. And I think that's really going back to some of the history of the fire services. The fire stations were always, they used to call them fire halls. And the reason for that, it was a hall where the community came and participated in community events. And it's nice getting back to having us involved, even though we've always been involved. Now you got that physical presence involved in those local communities.
And it's not a burden on noise either. I mean, we just don't hear it, I guess. We were just accustomed to it, but it's very quiet.
Thank you.
So once upon a time, during the summer, I think it was, we talked about a special industrial strength kind of washing machine where the firefighters can kind of purge their gear with toxics. And I know you have other safety scrubbing procedures in place, but I read recently that there's new equipment coming out on the market that will supposedly reduce the risk of contaminants to the firefighters. So my question is probably more rhetorical, but if 14% of the firefighters have a higher chance of contracting cancer than the normal population, when do we know it's time to invest in such technology when it comes out? I don't have an answer for it, and I don't know if I expect one, but I think about it.
And it's a challenging process because I'll use my daughter as a prime example. My daughter's studying up at Kent State environmental geographical science, and she was going on just about life in general and, you know, some of the stuff going on. And as I explained to her, when you look around, and I'm sort of teasing her about global warming and so forth, but if you look at some of the processes that now are being questioned and causing cancer, Teflon being one, and, you know, and so forth, each one of those were designed with a specific purpose. And at that point in time, we're determined to really be safe.
Yeah.
The unfortunate thing is what we're unable to really look at is the long term and, you know, impact of how that goes on. And so I bring this up is when it's a changing world, we look at hazardous materials, and the hazardous materials that we were really facing in the mid-'80s when it really became a prime example has really changed today. The materials that you see, and hopefully we won't have an issue today as a result of this, but have changed, and they've become more water soluble and so forth. But the foam that we have used for fighting fire has now been identified as one of the, as having fluorine in it, which is unable to be, how do I want to say it? It'll always be there, and there's a concern with the drinking water and so forth. So we've started to take a look at that, be proactive. You still can purchase that material. It still is a great fire product. But I guess early last year, we got rid of all of our foam. We partner with PPG. They disposed of all the old stuff that we have, so we no longer have that fluorine product. But we've also began using approximately 3 years ago, as far as decon, a product called Decon 7. And it's an inorganic or an organic material that will not only use for bio hazardous waste, but used for fentanyl. The PD's been utilizing it and so forth to neutralize it. So we're looking, as the world progresses, things, progress, looking at the materials that are out there to reduce the risk upon our firefighters and the work we do. Fortunately, it's just, it is a hazardous job. We recognize that, but we're doing, I shouldn't say we're, but our firefighters are doing everything that they can to prevent that and prevent their exposure. The other thing that we've done, because of the presumption requirements as far as the cancer, we've, I guess mid last year, we entered into a software that our personnel will be able to maintain and track all their responses, all their exposures and so forth. And even should they leave us or retire from us, that record is really their record, not necessarily ours. So that is their private medical record that they maintain. So if they should get cancer, they can say, hey, these are the calls that I was on. So those are the steps that we're taking at this point in time.
So can that firefighter, after retirement, 10 years later, record something? And as he records it, could somebody else see it?
No,
Our problem
actually,
is trying to capture the data after we're done.
yeah, and again, this is a medical, and this is certainly a privacy issue. I cannot see, and I'll just use Joe if you don't mind.
Not my name anyway.
I cannot see what responses or any type of, at least in the M4 software, that medical side, what he was exposed to and so forth. Because some of it also deals with the post-traumatic stress disorders too, so some of that type of exposure. That's their record. What we're able to do is get more global type of information, of some of the stuff that our guys and personnel may be exposed to. Certainly, I can always go back into our records and I can say, okay, I want to know how many responses Joe Murphy's been on. We can pull that and pull what unit he was on, through our record management. But that's not part of that medical history.
Got it, totally understand. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Chief Pishnowski, you also received additional staffing in the city's 2020 budget. I think it's just one. In other words,
We had.
from what I see, and my apologies for missing the city council, I just wasn't there with it. I keep trying to get to those. But from what I can see, you've reestablished the assistant chief position, converted a part-time records clerk into a full-time crime analysis tech, and added a new service coordinator. So I think it's like a net of one because you had some offsets in there.
It's a net of one, but that's under the provision that it's grant funded. So
Yes.
the conversion from the part-time records analyst to a full-time records technician was, last year was our first year with that part-time position, ended up doing really well. So we wanted to expand our capacity there to do a little more technical work and some more analytical work, and also take a little bit of the technical chores off of some of the members of our detective bureau to free up a little line level workspace. So that position just went full-time January 22nd. So that was actually kind of a success of the first year, built into the second year, and we went full-time with that. The assistant chief position is not a gain in manpower.
Right.
It's taken one of my 4 captains and creating one assistant chief and going down to 3 captains. Due to some turnover and some staffing processes we have now, that's probably been pushed back and a little lower in the priority scale at this time while we fill some other positions, but that's still a possibility for later this year. And then the service coordinator is a new position, but that's predicated on a grant that we have received from the Delaware Morrow Mental Health Recovery Services Board, and that's an extension of some of the work we're doing with our at-risk population. So a lot of the stuff that we see on the street, a lot of these behavioral health issues, addiction issues, other social issues, they oftentimes overlap with our calls for service, and sometimes they're causative. And not necessarily we deal with the crime, but there's an underlying factor that actually caused that crime. And so what we've been doing over the past several years is trying to do a warm handoff from someone with an addiction issue to a treatment center, or someone with a behavioral health issue to DED or to mental health, so that we can short circuit the recovery path and also keep from using the jail as a medical treatment facility. So that's been really successful over the past several years. And some of our success has been partnering with the fire department and the FIRST program and their service coordinators. But that's a little bit of a step outside of the box that they really are supposed to be operating in. But everyone saw the value of having someone be a full-time position to actually dedicate themselves to not only making the warm handoff, but staying engaged with that person to make sure they stay in the process. So right now, we'll, with the addiction calls, we'll double back the next morning and try and get people to take a ride to Maryhaven or get them information, try to get them to Maryhaven. But if we have someone who can be in touch with them, every day or every week or as a ongoing caseload, we're going to be way more successful in getting a permanent resolution to the underlying cause of why we're interacting with them and really increase the quality of life.
So the judicial system is not the final answer, there's the health system that you're partnering with?
Well, addiction is a public health issue. It's not a criminal justice issue. And quite frankly, a lot of times with the addiction and with the mental health issues, the only resort we have is the jail. And where a lot of this started was with a subject with Prater Willis. And he was out of control, and his family wasn't caring for him, and we had to do something with him, and we had nothing. There was nothing. There wasn't a bed available. There was nothing. And so between defense attorney, judge, prosecutors, and we agreed this person had to go to jail, but it was absolutely the last place. You don't take someone with the flu and put them in jail. So from that moment, we started working on some of these responses and how we can keep someone in his condition from getting there in the first place. So what's an early warning we can put in place? And we worked with the Council of State Governments and the Police Executive Research Forum and did some grant-funded work and developed an early warning system. And then that in turn was put into place to do the same thing with addiction. Now we started doing some follow-up work and developing teams around people that were high risk. And now this is really the next step of that to ensure even more continuity in some of that atypical service we try to provide to reduce those calls for service.
So is the grant just 1 year?
It's based on a yearly appropriation by the state, so it will continue to be, we haven't finalized the agreement yet with the board, but the intent is to fund it as long as the grant funding is there. And we will at least, sorry. Okay, yeah, so we at least, they're on a fiscal year, we're on a calendar year, so we at least have it through June, and with the expectation it'll be through next June. So, as long as that position is successful and as long as the crisis funding is coming in, that position will be funded.
Okay. Just a quick question. What type of analytics does the other job produce? Just a couple examples.
Well, it's a little bit of a catch-all.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the technical stuff, they do photos, videos, reproduction, enhancements. They do some analysis to look at linkages between crimes. They'll do some follow-ups for the officers. Great example is we recently had a spree of counterfeit $20 bills, and we had 7 or 8 cases. So our records analyst was able to work and coordinate some of that, but do some of the legwork for the officers working the case. So that's not a case we sent to the Detective Bureau. The officers kept it. But she was able to do some of that background work and make some linkage, and it ended up, well, I guess I shouldn't say how it ended up yet, but it ended well for us, let's put it that way. Some of the other things we'll be working with, we partner with Delaware County on a analytical system, so on crime analysis, and we work with the analysts at the sheriff's office, so she coordinates with them and does some crime alerts and bulletins and puts stuff out in that regard as well. And then the final thing is some of the technical skills or technical assessment. So we do a lot of stuff with cell phones. We have sent our detectives to school to obtain and learn how to use Cellbrite, which is a piece of technology that you can download anything on a cell phone. And we do a lot. Before we were sending that stuff out, and it was taking months to get back. So now we do it in-house. We can do it overnight. But every case doesn't need a detective, so that will give us capacity to free up our detective to do the felonies and continue their investigations, but have someone who can work on the phones that aren't as such a high priority.
Yeah, that sounds good. Sounds very helpful. So I read something the other day about Attorney General Barr just recently launched a presidential commission on law enforcement. So they selected 16 members of law enforcement officials across the country, and they gave them a task over 9 months to study an array of topics. And he noted challenges posed by technology and the wave of social problems, i.e. the homelessness, the drug addiction, the mental illness, that demand solutions that may be beyond the expertise of the police. So that's that loop back, trying to get the two systems in place. He also noted a decline in police hiring and morale, and was alarmed by the fact that more officers died of suicide than in any previous recorded year, you might say. And actually was more than was killed in the line of duty. And then on the flip side of that, in the police doing their thing over there, there are certain segments of the public that just rage over police shootings. You know, they had 950 shot and killed by police over the past year in the line of duty, and 145 here in Ohio since 2015. So you've got this flip side, and somewhere they come together in the middle is the hope. But just for the heck of it, I just kind of printed off a map of where all the shootings occurred, so you can just pass that around. But I mean, Columbus is there, clear as day. You don't even need a city title on the stuff. But and as long as we're close to Columbus, I mean, you just got to be aware. That's all. The Delaware City Police Citizen Academy is sponsoring your annual police awards banquet next Tuesday. Just to let you know, in our eyes, all the police officers are award winners. So we wish you and the department a wonderful evening. Last tidbit I have is, I think it was over late summer, I referenced a research study conducted by the Washington Post of DEA's ARCOS database, ARCOS. It stands for Automation of Reports and Consolidated Order System. But it tracks the path of every pain pill sold in the country. And by that I mean oxycodone and hydrocodone. And at the time, they had data from 2006 to 2012, and the numbers were 76 billion pills, resulting in nearly 100,000 deaths. I mean, that number is mind-boggling. They actually got hold of 2 additional years. And again, this is DEA, who saw this data coming, saw the trends, said nothing, did nothing, and it's only by court order that they were forced to release this information. But the additional 2 years added 24 billion more pills and 30,000 more deaths. So in total, when you take a look, 06 to 14, that's 100 billion pain pills in circulations across the country. You'll see a rash of lawsuits popping up, states against drug companies. Some of the executives that are addicted to money may be seeing jail time, and we know it's getting a little better. They'll cite longer lives, things like that, but I think we know it's just not over yet. In fact, 10 people just died in Columbus in 24 hours of overdose. With that, does any commission member want to provide any comments? No? Okay, there being no further business to conduct, I move to adjourn. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a move by Mr. Ripka, second by Mrs. Santos. Any final discussions? If not, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.